is to make sure that your needs are met regardless of the circumstance. The key words are patience and commitment. Servant displays honesty in dealing, always providing the right information, because if they weren't honest, they couldn't provide for you for yours. The key word is honesty. Now let's think about some of the characteristics of a leader. The leaders provide the needs of their people. Are leaders honest, caring, committed, selfless, and kind? Do they hold their people accountable, whether their people want them or not? The role of leadership is to lead their people by getting them to do a job or task. There are two ways they can do this: by power or by influence. Both methods are effective when used appropriately. But when the leader overuses power, he will eventually lose his position as a leader. To influence people, you have to have some type of authority. Authority is a power to influence or command thought, opinions, or behavior. We build authority anytime we serve and sacrifice for others. When a leader routinely meets with his or her people, learns about them, identifies and understands their needs, provide for their needs, and gain their trust, they establish relationships and build authority. The last key word is love. Not the love that we relate to feelings, but the love that is often spoken in a biblical term called agape, love. Agape means charity or service. Those of you who have been married for a little while know that love means being patient, kind, humble, respectful, selfless, honesty, and commitment. When you do all the things a servant does, you are demonstrating a great big love. You are meeting the needs of your people unconditionally, regardless of how you feel or how those you lead feel. Feelings have nothing to do with what a leader does, and true leaders don't let their feelings stop them from providing for the needs of the people they serve. Mother Teresa, Gandhi, and Martin Luther King Jr. were known as great leaders. They had a servant mentality, and their willingness to serve and sacrifice gave them authority. With that authority, they influenced people. In the Air Force, leadership is defined as an art or skill to influence people to accomplish the mission. To influence people, you must have authority. To gain authority, you must establish relationships. To establish relationships, you must serve and sacrifice for your people. When you serve and sacrifice for your people, you are demonstrating servant leadership. At the end of the day, did you serve anyone? Did you take care of your people? Did you build any relationships? Did you hold people accountable for their actions? Were you honest and kind, respectful, committed, and selfless in your actions? Do this not to pat on your back, but to keep yourself in check. To lead, you must serve, and when you serve, you are following the concepts of servant leadership. Many of you may wonder whether or not you are seen by others as a leader or follower in the workplace, school, church, or one's personal life. Well, we now author Robert Greenleaf explains servant leadership as being the servant leader first, and it begins with a natural feeling that one wants to serve or serve first. Then the conscious choice brings one to aspire to lead. He goes on to say that there are two types of criteria of servant leadership. Servant leadership takes place when people serve and grow as individuals, becoming healthier, wiser, and more autonomous, and likely themselves to become servants. The extent to which the leadership benefits those who are least advantaged in society, or at least does not disadvantage them. In other words, the servant leader serves others rather than others serving the leader. Serving others does come by helping them to achieve and improve. I'm going to have to interrupt this speech for a quick second. There's no eating in the sanctuary. So if you're eating, we're going to have to ask you to move over to the kitchen, to the dining hall, and eat in the dining hall. Okay? Thank you. Excuse me. Members or citizens. But employees in the business are not members of a club or citizen. Servant leadership also has protected overtones, as it has been suggested, doing things for employees rather than helping them to think for themselves. Treating employees as partners is more respectful and adds value not just to their lives but the lives of others. Serving people needs and creates the image of being unquestioned or submissive, which are not very positive images. In addition, leaders need to serve the needs of shareholders ahead of those of employees. Surely it makes more sense to say simply that leaders should consider the needs of employees. To be a servant to them, shift the metaphors from leaders as autocrats, which means people who need power to lead, to leaders as servants is going from one extreme to the other. Neither end of the spectrum is very revealing about how organizations function. The principle of servant leadership are words. It is the image of the servant that is pragmatic and misleading. Selflessness. As I shift gears from critical elements of servant leadership to simply describing an advocate of servant leadership and emphasize the two factors: serving employees and being selfless. The last is a valuable trait. But we don't need to call it servant leadership to advocate unselflessness. A good example of being selfless is a political leader who champions an unpopular policy, like eliminating carbon waste or a tight deadline because he or she feels it is the best interest of the country. The selfless leader is willing to risk one's own fate in order to do what is right. This is a real leadership. Like Martin Luther King, who risked going to jail and being killed in order to stand up for what he believed in. Of course, many professionals are also selfless without being leaders. Many doctors and nurses, for example. Do we need to talk about serving doctors and serving nurses? Or is a simple term, dedication, not sufficient? So it's not only leaders who are selfless. In any case, selflessness is possible without being a servant. What is leadership? There are many definitions of leadership, but dictionary.com defines it as being a position or function of a leader, a person who guides or directs a group. Are you a servant leader? Servant leadership requires the practice of certain disciplines or habits we practice. These disciplines are key elements of servanthood and serving. Serving Christ, they are progressive in nature as set forth below. Humility. Apart from Him, I can do nothing. Lead means to seek Him, and as He revealed Himself and what He is doing, I can love Him, obey, and work with him, this will lead me to serve him. As I lovingly serve others, this creates opportunity to exalt him by giving him the glory and to maximize my faithfulness, accountability. I ask others to hold me to these disciplines. Servant leadership can be seen as discovering humility. The key characteristics and focus of servant leadership is humility. Why? Because God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. What is pride? In the context of a Christian-led business, pride is simply the belief that we can build this business for God. Without his involvement, on the other hand, humility is the belief that apart from him, I can do nothing. That reflects his work, love, and brings him great joy. Only God can do that. Through us, here is some questions that you may want to ask yourself. What personal quality do you have that might make you a good servant leader? What attracts you to this concept? Why do you think you might be a servant leader yourself? Why do we think there are servant leaders, that we are servant leaders? Well, some folks may say that it can only make sense to talk about servant leadership if we view leadership as a role in charge of people. The view of leadership established here rejects this way of thinking about leadership. Instead, I have developed a non-based definition of leadership. One that can account for companies leading other companies. Green leaders, for example, lead people they don't know, and leadership shows bottom up. The person in charge of the group is a manager who only leads sometimes by influencing people to change direction. On the other hand, managers can serve the needs of subordinates, perhaps as a way of motivating them, but this is administrative motivation, not leadership. Not as defined here anyway. However, even with leaders, I think the word serve is just too strong. Good managers may put the needs of employees ahead of their own, but they can't put them ahead of customers or the organization if they want to keep their job. I think it is more accurate to say that leadership or leaders consider the need of the team, nurture them, and treat them with respect. But even if you want to call this serving them, it still is good management, not leadership. In summary, it may be that we believe that there are servant leaders among us, and it may be due to our inability to separate leadership and management effectively. An example of leading that is a servant. When civil rights actors like Martin Luther King and Gandhi challenged the status quo, they were serving the needs of those whom attitude they wanted to change. If they were serving anything, it was their own values or principles. Martin Luther King challenged us to change our attitude or needs. Namely, just seeing people as people and not just the color of their skin. These leaders were advocating for us to change our attitude, but this wasn't really serving us. Not in the sense of giving us what we wanted anyway. When a frontline worker seeks or succeeds in convincing managers to adopt a new product idea, this leadership is shown bottom up. This leadership serves the organization, not the needs of the manager and who adopts the product. In fact, such leadership often asks people to set aside their needs for the greater good. Leadership as defined here is simply an influence process, not a role. Leading by example. Leadership is not Leadership is shown by example in this case, as it is in any instance of leading by example. It is an influence process. If the needs of your colleagues are served in this situation, this is a secondary byproduct. It isn't leading by serving. Serving leadership. In the context of serving leadership, seeking Him first, the degree of our abiding in Him is dependent upon the depths of our understanding of who the vine is and who has His branches are. In other words, the more we understand who He is and who we are in Him, the more we can abide in Him. The degree of our abiding in Him is dependent upon the depths of our understanding of His love, power, grace, faithfulness, mercy, compassion, patience, peace, and joy. Likewise, the degree of our abiding in Him is dependent upon the depths of our understanding of who we are in Christ as a new creation, child, fan, brother, bride, beloved, saint, and heir of God. And what He has bestowed upon us, every spiritual blessing in the heavenly place, the greater the depth of our understanding of these things, the greater will be the depth of our abiding in Him. Obviously, the beginning point for abiding in Him is seeking Him. Hebrews 11:6 vividly demonstrates this principle. But our faith, knowing His work and word, it is possible to please Him. For he who comes to God must believe that He is,